Since all of us who love Captiva are interested in the early days of the island, the Captiva Library is attempting to gather oral histories from residents who have been part of the story of Captiva. I am Marion Chapman, and I will be talking with Beulah Wiles. Beulah, I believe you told me that your way back story began in 1896 with your grandfather.
Yes,
And he lived in Canada.
yes. They come from Canada in 1896 to Fort Myers.
Mm-hmm. And they, where did they come to? Fort Myers. To Fort Myers. Then what?
Well, my grandmother worked for she worked for Mrs. Wolfslayer. They're an old Fort Myers family.
Yeah.
Housework and different things. And she worked over there until 1900. And then they moved to Buckhead.
Mm-hmm.
And they homesteaded, I don't know whether it was an acre or what, but they did declare a homestead, or prove a homestead on Buckhead, which is still called Brainer's Bayou. And then in 1903 they moved across the bay to Captiva.
Yeah. Did they build immediately?
Yes.
Was that the big house that you tell me about, or was this something else?
No, it was just a sort of a two-room. You know, those houses with nothing then.
Yeah.
They had shell floors and palmetto thatch roofs.
And I imagine they had a few mosquitoes.
Oh, nobody knows nothing about mosquitoes. They were terrible. They were for many years. The state come in and
Yeah. When was at the time that your grandparents were on Buckhead, and then when they moved over here, was that when there was a large settlement at Wolford?
yes, there was, oh, maybe, the names, I'm afraid of that thing. I hate
Yeah, I
to be
know.
so
Just
disrespectful.
forget it. Yeah.
But there was the Dinkins, Dinkins. They still have the Dinkins Bayou.
Right.
There was the Holloways, the Dwights, the Dones, the Noys in Hawaii. Yeah, she had the post office there. And there was Mr. Rudolph Stolley. Yeah, I think he was a Episcopalian layman because he used to, Rudolph Staley. He was there. Right offhand, I can't remember any of them, but see.
Oh, how did they make their living? Was
Farming.
that farming? Was that when
That's
the
good
era of
farming.
the truck farming bit?
Yes,
That,
they farmed. They shipped it by the Dixie, Kinsey steamer line.
oh, they did.
They could ship it. They had a nice dock there.
Yeah.
They could crate it up and ship it
Yeah.
to the northern markets.
We were talking about Wolford and also your transportation of the vegetables and things. Now, the individuals, if they wanted to go from one place to the other, they sailboat?
Mules.
Yeah, but I mean on the water.
On the water, yes.
But didn't that take forever? Where'd they go to get their supplies?
St. James.
St. James.
I know my grandmother told me that my father would take the sailboat, and the Whiteheads had quite a big store at St. James. And they would get their supplies. They bought flour by the barrel,
Yeah.
sugar by the big bags.
But the prices were interesting then.
Oh, yeah, she told me flour was $2.50 a barrel.
That's something. That's something. Well, that was, it wasn't too long before motor-driven boats came, was it? Or,
No, but I couldn't tell you the year because they had them after I would come back here during my 3-month school vacation with my grandmother. And at that time they had boats. And the next they had Johnson Outboard Motor and
Yeah.
boats. You know, just
Yeah.
the way it goes.
right. Am I correct that your grandmother was the first postmistress here? Or was that your mother?
Well, on Captiva, it was my grandmother.
The grandmother.
The post office, the first post office in Captiva, was way out in the bay.
Way out in the bay.
We had, they call them a bulkhead.
Yeah.
And for a long time, you could see just the old dock standing because fishermen lived in them later.
Mm-hmm.
And they were out in the bay, and my uncle, my mother's sister's husband, Hunter Brown, had the first post office. I don't know whether they went out there for the mail or whether they brought it in a boat. They just got it any way they could. Because the Kinsey brothers boat, the old Success, it was a paddle wheel boat, was the first one.
Yeah.
And it brought the mail to the bulkhead.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it must have been about 1906 that my grandmother took it on Captiva. Because I guess they delivered. I don't know whether my father went out there after it and brought it in or whether they brought it up. They built a dock or they brought it up because as far back as I can remember, it was delivered there at our dock with the steamers.
Yeah.
I don't remember the Success coming into the dock. I do remember riding on it to Fort Myers when I was a little girl, about a week. Well, then they had the Gladys, and then they had the Dixie. That was a bigger one.
Well, now, was your big house built, that was built, of course, by your parents or grandparents, was
Yeah.
that built before you were born?
No.
No.
Just the old part of it. Then I think they kept that in as a part of a kitchen and built onto it. The big dining room, it was a big thing. It was like a house almost because they had a hotel there. And the big dining room was built in 1925.
Before then, though?
Well, they just built one room at a time on it. We had a big living room, and we had there was another outside porch and a bedroom in the back. And the bedrooms upstairs, they just built them as they could.
But it was built.
But the main building, the main part was built in 25.
Yeah. But the hotel, as far as being a hotel, that was early. Didn't that start early? About 1915 or something?
Well, it must have been about that time
Yeah.
that they could keep a few, people.
Yeah. Your grandmother owned quite a bit of property, didn't she?
40 acres.
40 acres. Could you tell me where it went extended to?
All the way from Twin Palms back to, where Charlie Jett lived?
Yeah.
That was ours. That was the edge. That's the first lot on our line.
Yeah.
Charlie Jett's.
And your house then was in that area down there?
Yeah, it was almost Charlie Jett's, just a little ways, say from here to that edge of the swimming pool. Then we had the big house.
Mm-hmm.
See, Charlie Jett had, I think there's 100 feet. Because that's the first property that I sold. Sold it to Miss Shepherd from Tampa. And then she's the one that sold it to Jett. And that was the only strip that I had left from Bay to Gulf.
All these lots now, all your other property went from Bay to Gulf. All the 40 acres.
Yes, originally. And in 1925, she sold 18 lots, 100 feet deep. So that took 1,800 feet off the Gulf back to a depth of 100 feet. So there was no more Gulf property left, see.
See that? How wide was the beach then,
Oh,
back in those early days? As far as back as you can remember, how wide was it?
it was very wide. It was not very good distance.
Half a mile, something like that?
Well, it's 5,380 feet a mile. It wouldn't be that many feet, would it? It was quite wide. It was out past that first. You know, when you go on that Captiva beach, you can drop off deep. There's another sandbar out there, it gets shallow again. I mean that you, and it would, that was all. I'd be safe in saying, I don't know, 1,000 feet.
Well, that's pretty darn good, even at that.
That's wide.
I believe that part of your mother's land also is where the cemetery is now. Is that right?
She gave that
Gave that land.
for the cemetery.
Fascinating old cemetery.
It is. You know, she and her little daughter, I told you about him that died of tetanus.
Yeah,
She
but that's
died
an
when
interesting story. Tell that.
She was 11. And she and her mother used to walk up the beach, around above the shells, all the beautiful shells. And since she and Ann were walking along the beach one day, and they were just looking around, and there was a tree, some kind of a tree. She said, "Oh, Mama," she said, "this is a beautiful tree and a beautiful spot." She said, "When I die, I want to be buried right there."
And that's what happened?
That's what happened.
And she is buried in that.
She must have been the first one.
Yeah.
I don't know at the time whether there was anybody else. I don't think so. Because I knew all those other people that are buried in there except one man from North Carolina. I didn't know him, but he is buried there, and they built the parsonage right over his grave. And then that's when the hard feelings were.
Yeah. Well, you were born then, I believe, in 1908.
Yeah.
You were not born on the island, though.
I was born in Fort Myers, and I was brought back here 2 or 3 weeks whenever.
Yeah.
You know, the women used to stay in bed, now they don't.
Yeah.
So I think I must have been maybe 3 or 4 weeks old. My mother brought me back.
So you lived the early years, your childhood years.
Yeah. Well, yes. I was just about. Let me see. I was 4 years old when my father died. My sister was 2. My father died the first day of April in 1912, and my brother was born the last day of April.
Mm.
So when I was 7, my mother remarried. So that we moved to Fort Myers. He was a carpenter. And he had come to the islands to work on that Mr. Lane was building that big Captiva hotel. He was from Indiana. So he wanted carpenters. And my father come down here to work on that hotel, and when it was finished, there was no more carpenter work here.
Yeah.
So he moved to Fort Myers and worked. And then when the Second World War, when the Kaiser in Germany, you remember?
Yeah, oh yeah.
The shipyard in Tampa was wanting carpenters. So we moved to Tampa, and he went to work in the shipyard, and he worked there all during the war.
You mentioned the Captiva Hotel. Where was that?
Well,
in relation to Timmy's Nook?
Right on the bay side.
Yeah.
Let me see if you know any of the homes. You know where that bubble room is?
Yes.
Well, just beyond that, say 100 feet, started that Captiva Lodge property, that it was built, the hotel on the bay side. But that was all their land. And our Dayton, eventually the hotel burned. I don't remember the year it burned. But our Dayton had owned Casabel, bought that land, and then Paul Stalin bought it from Dayton. And Paul Stalin, you know him?
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
Well, his home, he had a home in there. Has he sold it or?
I think he sold that.
Well, that was on some of the Captiva Lodge property. See, I put that in
Yeah,
bad shape. Cancer.
yeah,
So they're in the state in North Carolina.
yeah.
Had on there. And I don't, that Paul Stalin built his home on property, part of that property.
What was the Captiva Hotel? How large a place was it? I mean,
Oh, it
how
was
many
quite
rooms?
big. I wouldn't know about the rooms, but
Yeah.
it wasn't small.
Yeah.
It was a pretty good sized hotel. It's too bad somebody doesn't have some pictures of that.
But it must have burned probably in the early 20s anyway, if it was built.
Well, I don't think, no.
No?
Not
Went longer than
early
that?
20. No,
Went longer than that.
no, not as long as that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was there in 25. It was there. I wish I could remember. When that Captain.
Well, people came down to stay there mostly for the fishing, I would guess.
Oh, yes, and then they had the same, a lot of the older people. I know Mr. and Miss Boyce come, and the Alts come until they built.
Yeah.
Mr.
Now
Alt's daughter, that
that's
Miss
Kate
Schultz.
Schultz, yeah.
Well, she should know when it burned, because her father was here.
We'll have to check
She
on that
could tell you.
sometime. Yeah.
Because all those people stayed there at one time.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to you now. You are now living in Tampa at the
Yeah.
with your father and stuff.
Yeah.
But when you told me earlier that you went to school over here on the island.
When I was 5 years old.
Yeah. Now that's before you went back to Tampa, or is that
Yeah,
after?
that's before
Yeah.
we ever moved to Tampa.
Yeah. But where was the school?
It was right there where the church is.
Where the church is.
It was a school for a long time. Then they built one up, you know, up in the southeast direction. And I don't know how many years. That didn't last too many years before they come back.
Yeah.
I'm sure they got that school back here then.
And it had quite a number of children when you were
Oh,
growing?
yes. We used to have a lot of children.
Were you all
Well,
at one room, or did they have more than one room?
no, it's the one room. They built that Sunday school in one, you know, after they jacked it up and put in a new floor.
Mm-hmm. But you...
All those people that went to school then are great-grandparents, or should be. Been a long time ago.
I would say so. I would say so. So you went to Tampa, and then you did not return to the island
To live until 19 and, let's see, about 1927. And I never went.
Yeah. Well, were you married before you came back, or?
Yes, I was married in Tampa and had one daughter.
Yeah.
And she was born in 26, and I left there in 27 and come back with my daughter.
There was a hurricane, a pretty bad hurricane in 26.
I was
Okay.
in Tampa.
You were in Tampa then. What was the worst hurricane that you can remember in all the years you've been down here?
35.
35.
The Labor Day hurricane in 1935 was the worst one I ever remember. If anybody doesn't agree with me, I'm sorry, but I think that's the worst one I've ever seen.
Did do a lot of damage on Captiva?
Oh, it just twisted the boat, burnt buds out of coconut trees, You know, Australian pines are the worst hazard in the world in a hurricane.
I know.
They have no root system, and they just topple over.
Yeah.
So when they come down, it isn't surprising. I don't know, and I do remember in 35 of uprooting any coconut palms because they will sway and bend, but it twisted the heart out of them.
Does that would,
Twisted it.
I assume that would kill them? Does,
Oh yes, oh yes.
What
That
about-
was gone, and we had so many trees gone. One thing. We had a barometer. We didn't have storm warnings like we have now.
Yeah.
We knew it was down, well, they said something about Cuba. And my grandmother looked at the barometer, she says, well, I don't care about the weather reports, we're going to get that storm, it's dropping so fast. We had no warning, forewarning. We had 2 boats come in from Punta Gorda. One, the Carol, would come to Tarpon Bay and pick up fish. And the other fish boat from Punta Gorda would come to Andy's dock. He had that big fish house built out there. He would buy the fish and ice them, and they'd come 3 times a week. Pick up the fish and bring 300-pound blocks of ice. All the fuel that you used. You didn't have any filling stations. So they relied on the drums for the boats and everything else. And they brought this on these run boats, they call them. They had a hole in the bottom where they packed them in ice when they'd take them back to Punta Gorda. So the Punta Gorda Fish Company bought all the fish. They didn't get any warning. They left Punta Gorda that day. And Murray Hall was the captain on the big boat. And he come up to our dock. And he said, you know, the smaller boat, the Carol, had 2 old captains on it, old Captain Fred Lanier and Captain Al Acosta. And they were older than Murray. He was a middle-aged man. He said, he told my husband, he said, you know, I'm not going to tie up here at your dock. I'm going to go up to Uzeppa and get in the cove with my boat. And when the Carol comes in, let her tie up the dock. She's got a smaller boat, and 2 men rowed her, which they did. But about halfway through the hurricane, that boat, the water come up. It was getting up pretty high, you know, and it would have floated up on the dock. They cut the ropes. And the boat nosed up against our seawall. As far as they could get it, it wasn't very far away. And those 2 old fellows, they lashed themselves to the posts in the front. And the pumps they had were these great big things. They pumped for hours. My brother was with us. So Timmy and my brother were going to go out and see if they couldn't help them. When they opened that door and go out that door, they just rolled like 2 balls in the wind, just went sailing them across the yard. Well, they grappled onto the ground and everything else. They got back in the house, they knew they couldn't make it. But the thing listed, it never turned over the boat. But those 2 old men pumped all during that hurricane to keep it, you know, upright.
Right.
It was a horrible thing to watch.
Did the other boat make it to Uzeppa?
Oh, yes. Uzeppa has a good harbor.
Yeah.
You'd be safe there in a hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
Because Belton and Miriam, Belton had a cruiser. He was a guide always. And he had a reason. Okay, thank you. And he and Miriam would get in that cruiser in a hurricane and go into Brainerd's Bayou and just ride it out. Miriam said that bayou you could hardly feel any wind. Belton, I said, I always thought we'd be safer there because if the water come high, the boat was drift up. So
Yeah.
they would keep it out of the mangroves.
Yeah. Then the water, has the water ever come all the way across the narrow part of the island, say there by Timmy's Nook and that area? Have you ever seen it come all the way across?
No.
Just be high.
Yeah.
Well, that particular
The
hurricane.
highest water I've seen there, but it wouldn't have come all the way across the island, was in 1944. But it passed us at the Gulf. It didn't hit us direct. But boy, we had a high tide.
Yeah.
I walked on that road along by the Nook. A bunch of us got out, walked all the way up towards the High Seas. The water was up to here on in the road.
And that was 44.
44,
Yeah.
we had more water. The only thing we had in 35, it made it so badly with so many trees, it rained for 5 days
Oh, gosh.
before the hurricane hit. And the ground was so soft, those trees, those little lost trees behind this, went right over.
Must have taken forever to clear the roads.
Oh, it was terrible mess.
What'd you do for drinking water during something like that? Boil it off?
Well, we realized one was coming, we just drew it up, and we kept a lot of 5-gallon jugs for drinking,
Yeah.
cooking. And you'd fill everything, bathtub with water, and use it for flushing toilets. And water was a problem.
Yeah.
Because we relied on water pumps. We had our own well. There was no Island Water Association.
No.
And we couldn't pump any more water until we got electricity. We had electricity, see. So as soon as they could fix it, then we could pump our own water. But it was a mess. Because when that water comes up, and that old house we lived in, the water never come inside the house, no time.
That was fortunate.
Yeah. But if the water ever got up, in the yards, and, on the floor, the water's never been inside the nook. It's been there 30 years, and there's never been any water come inside that nook, and it's sitting right on the ground.
Yeah. Must be sort of a high spot there or something.
I guess it must be.
Yeah.
But it leaves a slick silt. After the water goes off, and then the ground is just slick, gray looking.
Yeah.
Kind of a silt on it. It's just awful.
And I imagine as the heat hits it, it sort of smells. Too.
Oh, terrible. I'll never forget them darn chickens.
Oh, tell about the chickens. You told me this before
Yeah.
we turned on the machine. Tell about the chickens.
Well, we had those 2 buildings. I must have had about 400 fryers in them. And I went over the big room and I looked out the window just in time to see those things collapse. Just buried those chickens, and there was so many limbs and things all over them. I just had to wait till my husband could clear it out. It was very not pleasant. But,
That was the end of the chickens,
oh,
for sure.
That was the best.
In, say, around 1935 or just before that, where was the post office then? Was that still in your house?
I don't. Yes, it was in the big house.
Yeah, that's
where
what I
we
mean,
lived,
yeah.
one room. And then it went into a 3rd-class post office. They said I'd have to build my own building or somebody else would. So I built it just maybe from my house as far as from here to the end of that seawall.
Yeah. And did you act as postmistress then?
Yeah, I was postmaster, I don't know, 20 years, I guess. And then Dodie Booth took it over.
Yeah, that's when I
had all kind of eye trouble. I had 2 eye operations. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't see for a year. I just got frantic.
Well, when Doty took it over, then was that when they built the existing building where it is now?
Yeah, but she was in my little building
Oh, she
for a
was?
long time.
Yeah.
And then she and Ray built the house there.
Yeah.
And then he built the post office because they don't pay any rent.
Yeah.
She had to have a bigger one. And after Ray put that building there, I don't think they gave him, as high as rent's got, more than $90 a month. Well, that, I noticed that don't even pay you enough for your electric. And this battery got today.
Let alone pay for something Peaches wanted to eat. You remember Peaches?
Oh,
Their dog?
Well, Dodie, she was ready to get out of the post office. I don't know. She didn't work until she could have gotten a full retirement. But the salary got to where it was very good, but she just, I don't know. Well, you know, artists are kind of eccentric.
That's right. Yes.
And Dodie was, she didn't like to be tied down, said she. And she said, I just don't think, you know, that I could work until my 20 years old. I can't take it.
What, in that time that we would, the period we're talking about, say, the early days of the 1920s and the early 1930s, what was South Seas like at that time?
Oh, that was the 25, 30s. Then was, I think Chadwick bought it about 25. Yeah. When in the years before that, there was a lot of people there. There was the Carters, and my God, there was about 4 brothers and their families.
And they all lived there?
Up at where the Kings lie, the big plantation is.
Mm-hmm.
They
King's
had,
Crown.
yeah, all those places scattered all over. Then there was down, just the side of South Seas was, well, Tobe Brown built the manor house.
Yeah.
And then the Knowles lived down there, the Whitemans, the Bates. Well, my mother remarried for maybe a year. Well, there was a big 2-story White House down in there. I think of the people by the name of Hilliard's owned it. But we lived in there for a year because my sister was born there. There was my brother and sister-in-law. Then when they remarried, she had 2 boys, 2 girls. And my sister was a girl the first. She's 66 now. She was born there.
In a house up there at South Seas.
Yeah. And then there was the Bates family. There was 3 of those girls. One of them married my mother's youngest brother. And the others got married and drifted off. You know, they in my school life, they just sort of, but there was quite a lot of houses there.
Yeah.
All scattered out.
Well, was it run as a hotel of any sort then at all?
Oh.
I mean, as a resort? No.
American Hotel Association bought it, and I think that's the first hotel.
Yeah. That's who owned it when
Yeah.
I first knew anything about it. One thing we haven't mentioned that I'm sure people would be interested in was the beginnings of Timmy's Nook. That was, I think you told me around 1950 that was.
You know, isn't it dumb of me not to know when he built that darn thing? Well, I know it's the best we could figure it's been there 30 years.
Yeah, it'd be around 1950 then.
He
Yeah.
had a block machine. You make your own, you pour your cement in it, and it makes the blocks, the
Yeah.
big blocks.
Yeah.
So he was doing He ran a truck for public utilities, done all the medium load boats and all and everything. All failed. Shell, he had 2 trucks that run down. And when he finished working, he built a few blocks. He got another built it up. He built it himself.
Concrete floor and everything.
Yeah.
It opened first just for sandwiches, didn't it?
Yes. He never,
Who made the sandwiches?
he did.
You did. Well, I'll be
And he served them.
very good. Very good. I wondered if you were making them at the post office. Or something.
Oh,
When did they,
he was beginning to get to where he couldn't do that kind. He had done so much hard work in his life. And he'd put in 60 to 18 hours a day. And then he was just wearing out.
Yeah.
And he realized he had to have some little something to do. But something to do. And that's when he,
well, I'm glad he did. I'm glad since it's
well,
turned into
I tried to get him one time. His legs were giving out on him. He had to have a cataract operation. We went to Tampa. Dr. Steinmetz done those. Then we went back and got his contact lens. He couldn't see with these kind of glasses. And he got these kind first. No, they were. He couldn't see, couldn't adjust. Well, it is. I'll tell you, it's kind of tough. Now they've got where they transplant a lens, but I had mine done when I was not 35. And I had glaucoma in one eye, so they done the double operation. He told me to wait to do the other as long as I could.
Right.
Because it wasn't very good to start on them. Well, I wore a black abstract over one of them to block it out so you could use the cataract glasses. And that just would make you weep, and it just drove me to distraction. So I went back and had the other one done. I come out there with 20/20 in the second eye. But I had the scar tissue from the glaucoma, so I didn't have quite that good vision in the right eye.
Right.
So he couldn't get used to these glasses, and I thought, well, Timmy, you've got to get out. I'll never forget when I first put them on. I was standing in the door at the post office, and all those coconut trees were right in front of my nose. I couldn't step. I felt like I was going down in a hole. So I just had to work on them a few minutes at a time, take them off. Of course, I couldn't see anything without them. And you can't use one cataract lens. You've got to have both of them. Now, I think with this lens business they put in, you can see, but they didn't have that. That's something modern.
Yeah.
So anyway, he couldn't get used to those things. It was driving me crazy. I said, all right, we'll go back to Tampa and you can try contacts. So Dr. Miller in the assignment's office made him contact lens. We got those. And he used to say, why don't you get contact lens? You won't have the heavy glasses won't bother you. And I said, I saw him take a round mirror and put those little things in his eyes. And if I said, you're crazy. If you think that for 1 minute I would ever go through that. Well, he was on a ride and morning bounced one of them off. So we had to have one more made. But they bothered him too. Kind of irritated his eyes.
Yeah. Well, was he continuing to run the Nook during this time with the bad eye?
Yes. He could see enough to get around there.
Well, now
One day I went to Fort Myers. I come back and he said, you always call me Sugar. He come in and he said, Sugar, something happened to my eye today. I said, what's wrong? He said, I don't know. I went to reach under the counter to get a paper or something. And when I stood up, I couldn't see. It was one of my eyes. So I looked at his eyes. I said, well, I don't understand, Penny. I said, they aren't inflamed. They don't look red, but I'll call Dr. Steinmetz and have them look at that tomorrow. I knew what it was. I knew it was the retina torn with. So I went to the telephone, and she said, Dr. Steinmetz is away for a week at a conventions or what you call these doctors go to. And I explained to her, I said, I'm afraid it's due to the retina. She said, that's what it sounds like. If it is, Dr. Steinmetz won't touch him. He'll send him to Dr. Presley, who is a retina specialist here that he uses. She said, you call Dr. Presley and tell him he can get his records from us and I'll have them ready. So I called and he said, bring him in. And he said, now we're going to do an examination for detached retinas. And he said, it's painful. But he said, don't feel bad at your doctor for not finding it, because he said, just eyes and surgery on eyes and working on eyes, they don't have to do a retina examination. He said it's a field all of its own. So he did, and sure enough, one of them had completely detached. When they done the surgery, they had to put the band around it. And the other one had a tiny little hole in it, the other eye. They sealed it with a laser beam. That's why he couldn't see. So we got the, he was a terrible nervous person anyway, which makes it hard when people have to fight.
Yeah.
So we went back and got his contact lens. They had to make him more. And he said, now, Mr. Wiles, you might not be able to read the paper all the way through, which people expect after retina surgery. You can't do much reading. But he said, you won't run into anything. You can walk, get around, and see what you're doing. So we got him. And about 3 weeks later, he had gastric ulcers. And he'd been in the hospital a couple times with him. About 3 weeks later, he began the hemorrhage again. I put him in the hospital. He never come out. I don't know whether you're just driving him crazy with the virus. Some people it's hard. You know, Miss Weeks was in Duke Hospital in Durham, North Carolina. She had cataract surgery. And before they left her retina detached, they put her back in and done a retina operation. Of course, she couldn't see out of that one eye.
Yeah.
But she's hanging on. She's remarkable.
Right, she is.
Well, 95 or 6. Yeah. And she still isn't senile.
No. Just watching the tape to be sure we don't run out. I want to ask you 2 questions. Do you prefer the old Captiva or the new Captiva?
Well, I really used to enjoy the old Captiva. If we went anywhere, we had to walk. We thought of it. And we had the road wasn't straight. We had trails, that walked to South East. Outside of the mosquitoes, it was just beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned to love it. And I think maybe when I come back in 27, I still could picture the old Captiva.
Yeah.
And I missed it.
Yeah.
But I can't say that the people were different.
Yeah.
And I never felt like a lot of people, you can't stop progress. Of course, Captiva's never gotten like Sanibel.
No.
So many restrictions. And I can't say that I don't like it the way it is today, but I don't know, older people, you just don't, you get over that feeling that you have for a place, like Captiva was.
Yeah.
It isn't. The people were so different. Everybody at that time everybody was just like a big family.
Yeah.
Helped everybody else. But people are different today. You know,
Too many.
different generations.
Yeah. That's true.
And the people, so many of them are not as interested in other people, not because, oh, but we had Miss Price at Twin Waters Inn had a wonderful clientele. And those people were always so helpful because they liked you and they wanted to be. And people aren't as willing anymore.
I think that's true.
You know, I don't want to get mixed up with it. There you are. That is my affair. That attitude.
Yeah.
They aren't like the people we had.
Not as interested in their fellow
Yeah,
human beings.
No. Well, you'll find that everywhere today, I think.
I think so.
I don't know whether it's a generation gap or it's just a different way of life.